It's like a professional dog.
I'm going to call to order this meeting September 6, 2016 of the East Hampton Planning Board. Is there anyone here to speak to anything that is not on tonight's agenda? All right. Turning to our minutes from the August 16th, 2016 meeting. Everybody have a chance to look at those?
Yep.
Any errors or omissions?
Motion to approve the minutes from the August 16th meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And Jim, you're abstaining? All right. Moving right along to A&R for Dennis LaCourse at 238 Park Street. Want to come up to the podium and I guess show us on here what you want to do?
I'm just adding 50 feet of land to the back of my back line.
Everybody have a chance to look at that?
If you'll see, I don't know, it's 50 feet by 264 or something like that. Is that right? 264, I don't have the plan in front of me.
Yeah.
50 feet deep.
And so it doesn't alter any of the frontage or anything, right, Jessica?
No, there's no frontage change.
Anybody have any questions, comments?
Motion to endorse the approval not required for Dennis LaCourse at 238 Park Street.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Correct.
Thank you.
Didn't let me do it.
Don't go away. You need your copies,
Yeah,
your
okay.
signed copies.
Yes, just sit there and
Two paper, one Mylar,
There's
is
the
that it?
Mylar, 3 paper, 1 Mylar.
were you upstairs in the mayor's office earlier today?
Yes.
You're the one who told us that the meeting was downstairs.
Yes.
I was sitting there. You didn't recognize. You were running pretty good.
She was ignoring
Is
you.
that too?
Yeah, I guess you did. We normally meet in the mayor's conference room.
Thank you very much.
You kept the copy.
Okay.
Yeah, I gave it to you, sir.
right,
Okay,
all
thank
set.
you. Have a good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thanks. All right, so next up on the agenda is the continued public hearing for dynamic energy, but I think it makes sense to move the site plan approval for Milltown Deli up, because I don't think that's going to take as long. Does anybody have any problems with that?
No.
Okay. So, anybody here on the Milltown Deli site plan approval?
My computer.
How you doing? You want to tell us your name and give us a quick rundown of what's changed here?
Yep, my name is Timothy St. John, and we are hopefully moving the plan, the site for our deli from 84.5 Cottage Street to 26 Cottage Street due to size constraints at 84.5.
And what else is going to change? I know this is a bigger spot, you said, but so is there going to be any change to the plans or?
No change to our business plan. The issue was that the prior site wasn't large enough to end up housing the actual business plan that we had. So this current site adds about 250 square feet, and so the business plan will be the same.
So the current plan has 250 square feet, or the prior one?
The current site is now 250 square feet larger
Oh, okay.
than the prior site.
So what's the total square footage there?
720.
Okay. And I know that the prior plan had a food. Are you going to have an eat-in portion at the new location?
We do plan, in the prior plan, we also had a plan to have maybe 4 to 6
Okay.
seats, and we're hoping to maintain that.
Same size?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Anybody have any questions before we go through more details here?
Yeah. Now, in the future, do you think it could have dining in the back by the pond, right back to that place?
That is a long-term hope and
Possible.
potential goal. We haven't explored it at all, but we have taken a look back there. And
I know the Platinum Pony had
They
field
did have
back
a
there.
small, seating area.
Back there and have a drink and watch the water.
Right.
Nice.
It was absolutely
Picnic
beautiful at the
tables
time,
back
so.
there.
Did you see the comments from the, what was it, city engineer?
Nobody had any comments?
Oh, nobody-
on This one.
Building department conditionally approved? Is that-
Yeah, so I spoke with the fire department, Captain Henneman, and I spoke with the building department as well. And their concerns were in regards to still needing approval for ventilation, which you need to work with the fire department and building department on that.
Absolutely.
And, you know, they had questions regarding what you were serving, the rendering of fats and all of that. So they're conditionally approved the current application before the board contingent on you working with them to make sure you're meeting code. You won't get a certificate of occupancy until they're squared away.
Okay.
So.
Perfect.
So I guess with respect to every other aspect, I mean, you've got a little more space here, but the same general volume of use and waste and that sort of stuff is the plan?
That is the plan, yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
If I'm understanding correctly, we don't need to condition any of those things because it's dependent, he won't get a certificate of occupancy anyway. Is that correct?
You're talking about the fire department
Yeah.
and yes, he will not get a CO until fire department and building department are satisfied.
Anybody else have any questions?
So no more, the original decision had language in there about catering service for off the map, so I presume that's no longer happening, right?
Yeah, that's no longer.
Okay. Just to make sure that the next decision is clear on that.
Motion to approve the site plan approval for 26 Cottage Street, Milltown Deli.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right.
You're all set. I'll draft a new decision and send it to you via email and in the mail.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, so next up is the continued public hearing for 198 Park Street. I again will recuse myself, so I'll just step in the back.
Hope you brought your phone.
Best of luck.
Can you give him a sec?
Before Mark starts, there was additional information that was submitted this afternoon. We have comments from the Barnes Aquifer Protection Advisory Committee. The applicant met with BayPAC this afternoon, and this is their comments.
Yep.
And there was additional information that was submitted by Dynamic Energy, John Perry, today regarding a mineral oil transformer, MSDS, so I presume you'll speak to this, correct?
Right, and I have copies of it.
Okay, I made copies as well, so.
That was on the transformer.
Right, that was the question that was asked.
I was there trying to.
I definitely want a moment to kind of review these, but board, my intention here is to allow the applicant to present any new information, speak to any changes, then maybe discuss the site visit, see how that went, and offer the public a chance to weigh in, and then do any deliberation. Does that all meet your needs? Does that work?
Yes, and I have some other documentations to submit to you, so if you want to read those first, or?
If I could just have a moment, that would be
Sure.
really helpful.
Yep, that's fine.
And lady? Good? Do a little more time, there's no rush. Everyone good? All right, go ahead, sir.
Okay, so, again, I'd like to present some additional documentation to the board that was discussed at our previous meeting from Dynamic, which was emailed to you all, and I'm not sure if it's in your packet or not, but I made hard copies of it.
They have they've seen the electronic version.
Okay, so this includes the certificate insurance that was requested, the agreement between Eversource and Dynamic to connect the solar system to the grid, and also a document that is put out by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which gives you some background as far as solar systems and issues that, or not issues, answering a lot of questions that people have about safety and chemicals and everything with that. So I'd like to give, I got 4 copies of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then at the site visit that was held on the 26th, a question was asked relative to the decommissioning and an example of the cost to decommission the system. So Dynamic has prepared, John Perry has prepared this letter that I'll give you a copy of, which is a similar, or an example of a decommissioning of a 2.4 megawatt system for that would cost 150,000. We're about a quarter of that, being 650. So roughly, if you did it by, proportional, it'd be about $40,000 to decommission the facility that you're talking about, or that we're talking about tonight. And then lastly, I have a section rendering that we had discussed at the site visit. And I've got some larger copies of this. I think I did 5 of these. You got a copy of that? Of what it would look like if you were standing at the where we held the site visit, standing on the sidewalk, going into Whitebrook Middle School, and what it would be if you cut right through the middle of the array, and what it would look like, because there is a significant drop-off from the entrance drives to Whitebrook Middle School, dropping down about 6 to 7 feet onto the site, and then the array going across, so that, basically from either the opposite side of the entrance drive or the southerly side of the entrance drive, you're pretty much looking over the top of the array, the bulk of their array being here. The grade does flatten out, so you will see pretty much eye level to eye level. If you remember when we came down in this section, there's not as a pronounced depression to the property as there is up in this section here. So we prepared this plan and submitted that for the board. So this shows the two driveways coming into White Brook Middle School, a person standing on the sidewalk, and then the drop off of 6 to 7 feet, and then the arrays being across the project site itself. And then lastly, John's got a couple more documents to give to you relative to a meeting that we had with BayPAC today for the sheets. I believe you got one of the sheets, but the other is the, I can maybe hand those out.
So Jessica had the MSDS sheet, and I think, and I have the test sheet. I didn't know if we wanted to hand these out as we address those questions.
Yeah, either way.
Just bring them on up. I think it's better
Okay.
just to have the information
Have it.
at hand,
Yeah.
so when you get to it.
Right.
Thank you.
So this is a, and John can address the board on this relative to the type of panels and the, should I say, lack of any contaminants or chemicals coming off of the panels because of the type of panels they are.
That'll
So is
help
it-
in light of the new information we just got and read.
Correct, right, and we discussed this at the BayPAC meeting, so they were very happy that we weren't using the panels that Patty was indicating in her letter, so
Since we're looking at this now, do you all want to ask questions about the BayPAC and talk about that?
Did she give you my copy?
Anyone have, like, for instance,
I just found it attached to my door when I came in.
Oh, okay, that's all right.
I'll
I got
scan
the
it.
draft, right? It's just-
I got the draft, and then this is the official one.
Okay,
Um,
probably the same. I got a
just-
copy of the
I
draft.
think I just handed out
BayPAC
my original.
says that no toxic materials will be used
Yes.
in transformers. Are you using toxic materials in the transformers?
Yeah, it looks like this, right? Yeah, this is the draft one.
It's, yeah.
Yeah,
it's
same one.
very
Okay, I
similar.
have it.
Yep.
I have it.
Okay.
Not a problem.
Hers has a cover letter as well, which.
Right, I don't need that.
Thanks. Here's my original.
Maybe we could just run down this and you can address,
Yeah, I was just
maybe,
taking
can we
a
just run through this and you can address,
Sure.
each point?
Maybe John can, each point we can talk about
So
it.
we're all looking at the general comments from BayPAC.
Yes.
Right.
So starting with the first one, obtain assurances that the solar panels contain no hazardous materials. So one of the concerns was heavy metals leaching out of the panels. So what I've handed out to you, and I've handed out all of the copies, I underestimated one, so I don't have a copy in front of me, but it's so the panel we planned on using is manufactured by Jinko. And Jinko had gone to an independent laboratory to have its panels tested for leaching. So this is an independent laboratory, independent from us, independent from Jinko, who has done the EPA testing methodology to see, after 18 hours of tumbling, the level of heavy metals that leach out of the panels. And those results are in front of you. So there were no detectable levels.
What does tumbling mean?
So what they do is, they take, so the panels are very big, so
Yeah.
what they do is they take a small panel, they put it in a solution, and the test results explain all of that on the first page.
I
what
see
they do.
acetic acid, sodium
Right, so they
hydroxide.
put it in an acid
Solvent.
solution for
Uh-huh.
18 hours and literally tumble to see what leaches out of it. And then they test the solution. And then you can see all of the methodology, I think it's on page 3. So there's a blank one done so that they know that the container isn't contaminated. There's a laboratory control one done where they do it in deionized water. Then there's a spike matrix, so they add known additional quantity of material to make sure that the test is working. So if they add 20%, it should come back that they're seeing 20%.
And this test says here it was done July 12th of this year, so it's very recently.
Yeah, it coincidentally is very recent.
I want to make sure I'm looking, that's a good answer to one of the questions we had, but the first thing I had on the list was about the planting. Does that?
Yes, so I can address that. Yeah, you skipped over that, John, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
relative to the grass and mowing, so that our plan is to have low-growing grasses that would get planted if any areas are disturbed. Like we had talked about at the last meeting, Williston staff will be mowing the area underneath the panels to keep it down 2 times a year, roughly. If we need more, they will mow more, if less. So that reduces the potential for fire, brush fire or grass fire underneath the panels. So that's one of her key points, is that you don't want to have a grass fire underneath the panels and potentially sparking the panels and the electronics within them. So we definitely, within the plan and application, will use that methodology and maintain the grass at a low level.
Before you go to the next item there, that you tumbled them, they tested as having no leaching. That's great. Do these panels, to your knowledge, contain within them, obviously well contained, CDTE, CIS, or GAA?
Not to my knowledge.
Right.
Not to my knowledge. I think that's more specific to thin film. But again, there might be trace elements of cadmium that, again, were not detected after 18 hours of tumbling. And that's an EPA testing methodology. That's nothing that we direct or come up with.
Thank you. Please continue.
Right, and when we mentioned that we weren't using those panels, we were using the Genco panels. The Barnes Aquifer Committee were very happy that, so that, we weren't going to use that type style of panels and so forth, because that is a problematic product, I guess.
So you're planning to have low-growing grasses and to mow, and in addition, the panels have no hazardous materials or
Correct.
or very few, so it sort of meets the request from both sides.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. We feel that, this item number 1 is, very achievable on our end of it. We have no issues with, if that's a condition, that's fine, of the permit.
Please continue.
Ensure that there are no oils, hazardous material, or other potential contaminants stored on site. There will be no, as we talked about. The only, which is the transformer, which, it shows up here, is the only potential source of what used to be pollution from transformers, like you would see along the streets and so forth. Now there are vegetable oil used in those. Even the new ones along the streets, they've gotten away from all the type of contaminant or contamination or hazardous materials within those, so that there is, even on site, that one transformer will have vegetable oil or a product similar to that.
Right, it's actually mineral oil. And
Mineral oil.
on that, I just got these questions today, so that's why some of these documents are so late coming in. So on that sheet that was passed out, the MSDS, if you go to page 4, it lists if there are hazardous or toxic chemicals present in the mineral oil. And you can read down all of the categories, probably some of which you've seen a number of times before, and there aren't any. In Massachusetts and California are very tough. So California, Prop 65, that's anything carcinogenic, anything known to cause birth defects or reproductive problems, not even any labeling required. For the mineral oil in this transformer. It was asked earlier if this is a food-grade mineral oil. I could pretty much say it is not. It's not something, I mean, they talk about if you ingest it, you see a doctor, but this would be mineral oil that you buy off the shelf at the grocery if they said so.
Okay. Any questions
One
about any of
question,
that?
yeah. Even though that transformer does have a potential of hazard, but it's very mild, you would really have to do something to it to get that someone would have to take like a sledgehammer to it to open it.
Well,
because-
right, it's a sealed transformer, and they're all over your town. You know,
Right.
you have high voltage distribution lines anywhere, every building outside. You see that green thing, it's stepping down.
Right.
They're just everywhere. I mean, it's a very typical, you know, we're digging into it because of this project, but it's a very, very common, typical installation that.
Yeah,
almost any building would have.
that'll be up on a pole,
No, that's on the ground.
the ground.
Yeah, it's on the ground. Right.
Will it be,
It's within the fenced-in area.
okay,
So it's within the project fenced-in area. And there's a whole, the original application has a detail and pictures of the unit itself. And it's sit on a concrete base and protected.
So the MSDS sheet, section 12 and 13, it says aquatic release, advise authorities if product has entered or may enter water courses or sewer drains. And then section 13, it says, do not flush to drain storm sewer, contract to authorized disposal service. If permitted, incineration may be practical, consider recycling.
Right.
Would you be amenable to a stipulation that says as much, that you will advise authorities if it's entering water courses or sewer drains, and that you will properly dispose of it per this?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't see any issue with that
Okay.
at all. We would never expect that to, no, that would not be a problem. We
Right.
would never expect it to be open, so.
So if there was, you know, a leakage of the material from it, the grade of the property is towards the rear, like we had talked about.
Mhm.
So looking at this, the nearest wetland area on the site itself is 260 feet away before it would ever
Yeah.
get to a wetland.
Right.
There is an intermittent stream that's way up off the property itself. There's another isolated area there. So it's a great distance of, you know, well over 200 feet before it would, so it wouldn't flow because there's not that much material in it.
it would have to be something major to
Right.
crack that open or anything.
Okay.
But, yeah, you can make that a stipulation.
There's no more questions about that? Next one. Non-toxic materials used in the transformer, we
So-
covered. Clean photovoltaic panels.
Right. So that's what we talked about, the type of panels we're using and the materials and so that typically, what John mentioned before, you don't need to go in and clean the panels. You know, you let rainwater do its thing, Mother Nature do its thing. Very rarely do you ever have to clean them. But if for whatever reason you had to, you can put a stipulation that there's, using water or some type of a non-chemical
Vinegar, they say.
base, that would be fine. I don't see a problem with that.
Any questions about that? All right, fertilizers and pesticides.
So fertilizer and pesticides, we are not proposing to use either on the site. Again, if you fertilize the area, then they've got to mow it more often, and they don't want to mow it more often. So it's going to be left natural, so if that's a condition, that's fine.
Okay.
We don't want to use any fertilizer or pesticides on the property.
Now, you talked about decommissioning, but there was a question you said do you have any further questions about decommissioning? Do you all feel that was answered well in the documentation? Or?
You're right, so we had a lot of conversation at the last meeting and at the site visit about this issue. And maybe Chuck can talk to that. But We would like to not have, you know, a $40,000 bond. The property is worth a lot more than $40,000 if you had to decommission the panels. And, you know, maybe Chuck can, you know, speak more to that. You know, Williston is behind, like we had talked about. It's their property. The property in itself is valued more than $150,000, so that's, you know, 3 times what the decommissioning value of it. So even if it wasn't a solar field, it would be used for something else. So, and Williston wants to maintain that continually.
The documentation you received, I think, that we received from Dynamic Energy, which said to get some estimate of what a decommissioning cost would be at about $40,000 30 years from now. It is really not Dynamic Energy's project per se. It's actually, you know, at decommissioning time, Williston would own it and likely wouldn't decommission it. Would continue to let it run and generate electricity for itself for the school. But if there did have to be decommissioning, you know, a $40,000 project for the school would just go ahead and do a $40,000 project and be able to just take care of it and get it in condition so the property can be used for something else. So putting a bond in place, it's just, you know, my own opinion is that it's a lot of, it's kind of belts and suspenders a little bit. I think the school would be very willing to make sure that, you know, at the time, you know, I'm speaking for a business manager who's probably 30 years ahead, so I'm making a promise for that individual. So, but I can't imagine that it would be a problem at that point to say, okay, we're just going to decommission this, pay what it takes to get that done.
For the sake of the cameras, could you state your name?
Yep, I'm sorry, Chuck McCullough.
Thank you.
I'm the business officer at Williston.
What was the conversation like in the meeting you were at this afternoon about this issue?
As far as the Barnes Aquifer,
Because they're recommending a bond.
Right, right. This is, what we talked about with them was relative to, this is a kind of a standard for any solar project that might come in. This is standards that they kind of used in the project in Holyoke and one in Westfield, so they're, you know, kind of standardizing it. We didn't really dive into this that much because it really is not the Barnes Aquifer's purview.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's more of a general comment, I believe, that, you know, it's not their
And what is the hesitation to doing it? I understand the sentiment that it's maybe not necessary, but is it, you know, what's the hesitation to just doing it to have all the T's crossed and I's dotted?
You know, it's just, you know, we're just, you know, paying additional money for a bond that I would be having to maintain, working with an insurance broker year after year to make sure that that bond is maintained, or setting aside money in a bank account, which frankly would just have to be accounted for. And, you know, again, you know, it's a $40,000 project 30 years from now. We probably just, you know, between the projects that we manage year in and year out, it's going to be one of a number of projects that we would just do and say we've got to do this here. So it's not, you know, I guess for our operation that isn't that big a deal to be able to say, all right, we have to take this thing out. Let's make sure we spend $40,000 and get it done that time. So I think the school would be able to support that very easily. And that's, you know, I think in light of, instead of doing a bond or doing, you know, certainly a letter from me saying Dynamic Energy would decommission it, put it in the school's hands, and the school understands its responsibilities to decommission it if it chooses to do so. I would suspect that the school would not do it because at 20 to 30 years, at least some of the indications are that these projects actually, while there is some slight degradation in their performance, they're still producing electricity and doing a very good job. So I couldn't imagine that they'd want to decommission it and take it offline.
So you mean that not having a bond, but you're still obligated, whether it be 10, 20, 30 years from now, if you did say you're gonna abandon, you would automatically tear that out, take it down. You'd be obligated to do it.
Yeah, whether it was a building we put there, or whether it was something else, I mean, in this case, solar array, you know, we would make those judgments at that time and say, yeah, we wanna use this property for something else, and we would invest the money and time and effort to decommission, whether it was a building or whether it was solar panels. So, in this instance, I don't think we would decommission it. I'm guessing,
Right.
30 years out, that in most instances right now, I think some of the older solar arrays that you're aware of now may not be 20, 30 years old, but they are maybe 20. And we're finding that there's no reason to take them down because they're still producing at a high level. The quality of the panels that are being produced now, as opposed to say 20 years ago, it's like night and day. So the efficiencies are going to be that much more. So it'd be surprising 30 years from now, see if there's someone young enough to say they'll be around in 30 years, to see if that's going to be, I doubt very seriously that they want to take that down. They probably want electricity that's being produced.
So do we seriously want a bond to be put on this, or just a letter stating that it will be decommissioned by the company when and if it does happen? I'm just saying that you're saying that you probably don't need to have the bond issue, and I sort of agree with you, but I would like to see something where it states that in writing if there's no bond issue. But if the board feels that we should have a bond, then
I'd say you'd very easily be able to produce a letter, because it wouldn't be the company, it'd be Williston. At that point, when it's decommitted, it becomes our property, so it's the school's property. You know, all the equipment, everything. So at that point in time, you know, it would be our responsibility. Again, whether we're building or whether we're solar panels, it'd be the same thing. We'd own it, we'd take responsibility for whatever we needed to do.
Your
Right.
lease, sorry,
I
is your
just
lease
thought I'd
agreement
have
30
that.
years? Is that what I'm hearing?
Excuse me?
Your lease agreement is 30 years?
20 years or 20 years? 20, is it 25?
The PPA is 25 years.
25 years.
25 years.
I guess the other point to make is this is a little different situation than such as a landfill, where you can't do anything else with the property but put solar panels on a landfill, basically, where this has value at standalone. So if the panels weren't there, the value of this land for building a house, school, a building, you know, some other type of structure is there. So
Okay.
that's why I don't think it would just
So
be
I'm
dormant.
I'm keeping a list of all the kinds of things that we've talked about, and I think what I like to do, unless you guys really want to hash this out, is I'll go through that at the end after we got the public input and heard all the opinions, and we can kind of decide one by one what we want to do about each of these line items. Will that work for you guys?
I also want to remind you that you do need to discuss the discussions that happened at the site visit and any additional information, so don't forget that in your
Absolutely
sort of
won't.
list of stuff to do.
Absolutely won't.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so that was the last item on here, I think, except what, solar panels and grassland bird habitat?
Right, so this is a little, talking about wildlife habitat and bird habitat, and from Mass Audubon for larger solar projects than we have, being an example of, 10 acres or 10, or 5 acres of field. We have 2.5 acres of solar panels being proposed here. The Barnes Aquifer Committee agreed that the site itself, because the majority of the site is already a lawn area. You remember, as a site visit, it was previously a farm, not used in a long time, but there was a barn that collapsed and so forth. So there's really no bird habitat that's using the property as if it was a raw piece of land in the field somewhere that bird habitat would be. And this speaks about larger tracts of land and or larger solar arrays than what we're proposing here.
yeah, in the letter from Jonathan Atwood states that 3 and 5 acre pieces of property will be less damaging to habitat birds in that than a 50 acre
Right.
tract.
Right.
I would go along with that.
So again, and, you know, we are providing for other types of habitat based on the Conservation Commission's request about the fence being up 6 inches to allow movement of habitat, wildlife habitat, underneath the fence for the smaller critters.
Any other questions about habitat? Then let's talk about the site visit. Anyone want to tell me their thoughts?
Well, I thought it was well worthwhile. We actually got a first-hand look to see what they're actually gonna do. And I thought the detail on the layout was fantastic, with all the trees, and he had every tree and every bush, you know, right on it. Was fantastic. You could actually really interpret what was on here, you know, down there. I thought it was worth going.
Yeah, it was very informative, very helpful,
Yeah.
to be able to see the topography in person and to see there's really what you can see in this cross section that we now have too, that there's really that big drop off from the road down into the site. Also, what wasn't clear to me from the plans was on the corner of Park Street and the drive going into the school. There, we had those pictures of the poles, the utility poles, and to me in the picture they looked like they were right on the street, but they're actually further in. It was just hard to see like there was no depth perception in the image, you know what I mean? So those poles are going to be really further down the hill, not right up on the street. What else did we talk about? We walked around the perimeter on the, I guess the north side where there's the request for the setback waiver, and took a look at that, the storm drain, which the owner of the abutting property had asked about. We took a look at that, saw where the fence would start, where the panels would start, and all of that. There's a very tall, like, privet hedge or hemlock hedge right along that property line that is pretty tall. I mean, it's like 10 or 12 feet tall, probably. Already a screen there. We looked at the wetland areas.
Management of the right-of-ways was something that you were going to follow up on, so.
Right, still working with the school department about cleaning the vegetation along the right-of-way and the school. So we did meet, Jeff and I met with the city engineer.
You did, okay.
And discussed those two issues, so that he was thrilled that we were going to manage that vegetation by Williston. For that, he is also going to have his crew go out and try to evaluate where the drainage outlet pipe comes from the street through the property, so we make sure that that stays intact. So that he's going to be working on that, and we will work with him to make sure that that stays intact.
So he's evaluating the drainage pipe. I'm sorry, can you say that again?
So so he's going to go out and try to locate where it is coming through the property, because really no one knows where it comes from.
Okay,
So he's going to put a camera down it
I see.
and run a camera down to see where it discharges on
I
the
see.
property itself.
Okay.
So we'll have a physical location of it, and then we can work with Dynamic and the contractor to make sure that they don't put one of their posts right through the pipe.
Yep.
We can move things around to make sure that that pipe stays intact.
And you'll continue to maintain it as well, the culvert?
Correct. So I'm guessing that it might be from one of these two drainage structures. This is pretty much the low point of Park Street in this area. So he wasn't sure, but he thought maybe the point it'd come through here, and it's an ancient pipe that's been there forever.
Did the site visit give you guys any questions that you wanted to ask?
I don't believe so. The other thing we should say is that that elm tree that we talked about last
Oh, yes.
time is actually a black locust, which
Yeah.
is an invasive species.
Good to know.
And not, so we don't have to worry about
to worry
cutting
about
down an American elm.
Correct.
Yes.
Well, that is good news.
Um,
Okay. So we've talked about the site visit, we've covered the additional information, unless you have more you want to add now.
No, I think I'm good.
I think I'd like to ask the public if there's anyone here that wants to comment on this at this point. Anybody? No? Okay. All right, so do you want to, I've got some items here, I can kind of read them off to you guys and you can tell me, just discuss them. The first one was there was a discussion about, I think it was from the materials that you read last time, about them needing to contact emergency management services as part of this, EMS. You're supposed to contact them to let them know you're doing something. Do you guys remember this from the last?
Well, there was something in there in regards to
Yeah.
contacting the fire department just so they're, in case there needed to be a plan, in case the things catch on fire, I believe is what it was.
That was sort of
And I believe your response at the last meeting was that that the fire department received this application with all the other city boards and departments, and they didn't have any additional comments, and so that was covered.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
The second item I had on the list was the proof of insurance and surety, which is, I think, the $40,000 bond
Right.
and the document for insurance. You guys want to talk about your feelings about this, whether you want to go with it or not?
Well, so we have the insurance, that was provided to us, so
Yep.
that's taken care of. So we're really just talking about
The surety.
the bond, yeah.
I personally feel that I take Williston's backing. Really, I love Williston. I really do. I think they're a great institution and good for East Hampton. But it's not the word that I'm taking. It's the financial weight that I take as having meaning. I think that it's a no-brainer that they're going to back this up. I love the idea of providing a letter. I personally don't feel a bond is necessary, but I would acquiesce if the board felt differently. Anyone else?
I don't think we need a bond.
Do you like the idea of a letter?
Yeah.
I think the letter's fine.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I would just say, I think my concern is more of like from a best practices standpoint, like what none of us can see the future, none of us knows, so if, maybe the solar panels will be decommissioned in 30 years, maybe they'll go 50 years and then they'll need to be taken care of. And my concern is just making sure that no matter what happens, we aren't left with an abandoned 3-acre solar site. And, like I said, none of us can tell the future. So, I'll just sort of state for the record that the ordinance says it's something we can do. BayPAC sort of was suggesting that we do it, even though that's not their jurisdiction. I'm not going to block this, I think it's fine to ask for a letter instead. But, I just have some misgivings about what the best practice is here.
Well, the only thing I have is that Williston has been here for so long, and I don't see them leaving town in 30 years. I got a feeling they're going to be here long after we're probably gone.
I just think it's important that we be consistent in our decisions. It shouldn't necessarily come down to who the applicant is, but what we're going to do in this situation over and over again. If somebody came to us tomorrow, different applicant for a similar proposal, what would we do? That's all.
Well, the other issue is that in 20 or 30 years, $40,000 isn't going to be a whole hell of a lot to clean up any kind of a decommissioning or anything that has to be done. So, aside from it being a good faith gesture, which I think a letter can serve adequately to do the same thing.
Okay.
So in terms of what I would like to see in the letter, because we're saying, a letter, but I don't know what exactly the letter would say, but I would like to see it say that Williston will, take responsibility for the decommissioning, appropriate disposal, recycling of the panels whenever the facility is shut down.
Decommission.
I'm a little unclear on whether decommissioned is at the end of the lease or whenever you decide to shut it off. Just to be clear that even if you keep it going past 30 years, whenever it is shut down or decommissioned, that you'll be responsible for
Essentially, what we're
that
asking
removal,
for,
and that it will be removed like in a timely fashion, that kind of thing.
is a statement of surety without a bond. associated to it. It's the same thing we require, just without the financial commitment. Am I right? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we would be then adding that statement of surety as a stipulation into this approval. Everyone okay with that? Is that enough language, a statement of surety? We can spell it out more.
So do you want to try to,
I liked her language.
okay,
So I basically, that, you know, when it's decommissioned, it will be removed within a timely fashion. I don't know if we need to get more specific than that. That the materials will
well,
be,
anybody can translate timely fashion
Yeah. Into
differently.
anything,
So I'm just warning you, I'm just
yeah,
saying that.
within 2 years, let's say, so it doesn't sit for 10, I don't know. And that the materials will be properly disposed of and recycled if appropriate.
Is this a condition, or are you asking for a letter?
We're asking for a letter that makes these statements. A statement of surety that contains.
So.
I wouldn't mind having it as a condition if
So I
that's
guess my
appropriate.
question is, okay, 30 years from now, when nobody can find the paperwork, but all we can find is the decision.
Yeah.
Although I think I keep pretty good records, so hopefully the people will be able to find things. But I just, you know, I would encourage you to place it as a condition, because then it's with everything else that you've talked about and it's there. If you want to say that the condition is that they will provide you with a letter that states these things, then, you know, again, then it's you've got both. You've got the letter itself and you've got a condition. Now, the question is, in terms of the enforcement of them providing a letter, do you want to tie it to them being able to get a building permit? Or how are you going to ensure that this letter actually does get created and delivered if you're voting on this tonight?
I think contingent on the building permit is a fine way to handle it, unless someone has a different idea.
Can we just put it as a condition instead of requiring
Just
a letter?
flat.
It's easier. Yeah.
Sure, I mean, it's the same thing. What we're saying is, instead of you drafting a letter, we're going to state that as a condition of you getting your building permit, you're agreeing that at the point at which you decommission.
Well, no.
No?
The letter would be tied to the building. Either just say a condition is, that condition is when the facility is decommissioned, that Williston will remove the facility within 2 years and all materials will be properly disposed and recycled as, what did you say, as?
If appropriate, I think is what I said.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we're careful with our language. When your lease is up, that doesn't institute anything like a decommission or anything like that. Decommissioning is really at your discretion at the point at which you decide it's no longer a profitable venture for you. I mean, is that really what we're talking about here?
Because it's the school's property, and the school will run it until they deem the need to use the property or for something else. And at that time, they make a decision on
The proposed language we're discussing seems workable?
yeah, it seems to. I think, the only question I'd have is just, the 2 years is, who knows, like.
It's arbitrary, just
we could
picking
try to
anything.
Put it in for a year.
Right.
I agree with you that you always say timely fashion is, usually, Jesse and the other room is saying that usually what they say, in a reasonable amount of time, folks, decision to decommission is usually a allowable amount of time that gives us the appropriate latitude to get it done, but, saying it'll be done in 10 years or 5 years may not be reasonable. You'd have to figure out, maybe 3 years, just.
Well, under the zoning, anything that's abandoned after 2 years is.
So
Yeah,
default.
that's why
Is considered,
Yeah,
is,
abandoned after 2 years?
after anything that, so, for other uses, if, say, there's a commercial business and they vacate the property and it doesn't, nothing happens there for 2 years, and then somebody wants to.
2 years. If that's
2
the
years
case,
is kind of
then
under
that's
zoning
perfect.
is.
That's
what-
why I threw that out there.
Is like the abandonment
2 years fine.
definition
Yeah,
under the
then that's
zoning.
perfectly fine.
So-
That makes sense.
So do you feel, I think we're all in agreement now, we have,
So there'll be a condition that says when the facility is determined to be decommissioned, it will be removed within 2 years. Materials will be properly disposed and recycled as appropriate.
is that good for everyone?
That's good.
Great. So the next item I had on my list is parking for the bus. Was an issue that we discussed at the last meeting. Anyone want to talk about that at all? There was concern that there wasn't perhaps adequate parking, that they might be on the street, I think is what some of the initial discussion
Well,
was.
I thought if they used the bus, they'd have enough room to park it near there. But the other discussion was, would they come with private cars, and they would have to be parked out on the street.
Yeah, well, I could clarify that. So for the school, for Williston, if we were going to use the site, there will be parking sufficient on the site so that the vehicles that we use, we would be able to drive right onto the property and students would disembark on the property, which is, from our standpoint, we would want that from a safety standpoint. The concern we had is for East Hampton schools, if they were to use the site for educational purposes, and they were to use a larger bus that may not be able to drive on the site, where would they be able to disembark? And I think the suggestion was, rather than doing that on Park Street, which I wouldn't want, and I don't think the school department would want, I think to disembark on the White Brook driveway and to have them disembark there. Small personal vehicles as well as our minibuses can go on the site, so that's not an issue. I think it's just if there were larger school buses, using the White Brook driveway would be best.
Any questions about that, concerns? I myself have parked there at the band functions many, many, many times.
So does it make sense to have a condition that says there shall be no parking of vehicles associated with the facility on Park Street?
Again?
And then that just.
Park Street being the main thoroughfare.
Right, and I think one of the things that came up during the site visit as well is that the line of visibility coming out of White Brook Middle School on that access and looking down, I guess it's north, on Park Street is a little sketchy.
Yeah.
And so I think even if you had a bus parked there, it would make it even more unsafe.
So not only no parking on Park Street itself, but on the White Brook parking lot
No.
should
If
be
there
back.
was a bus parked on Park Street and you were a vehicle coming out of White Brook
Oh,
Middle School and you were
okay, I
trying
see.
to
Yeah.
look at traffic
No, I
from that
agree with that.
direction, it would be difficult. It's hard enough to see it as it is, but to have a huge bus blocking view as well would make it.
And that's,
even
yeah,
more
that's where
dangerous.
we wanna clean up all the lower vegetation, the sumac, all the
That'll help.
invasives in here.
Yeah.
And work with the school department to make
How do you
it more
guys
safe.
feel about the no parking on Park Street stipulation?
That's a good idea.
It's fine with me.
Yeah, we said already gonna park out in that, in the area itself, so.
Can we add that in
Yep,
as criteria?
so you wanted to say no parking for access to site will be on Park Street?
Yeah.
Park Street, yeah. That sounds good.
Fourth item on my list was brought to us and was mentioned in this meeting, brought to us by one of the abutting neighbors, and it was about maintaining the integrity of the culvert, which you guys have had a look at, and you said that you're going to continue. I want to make sure that you'll maintain it. So would you consider putting a condition in that they will maintain the culvert, or is it necessary?
No, I think we should put in
Did
it
you
as a
commit to doing that for the
condition.
city engineer, with the city engineer, maintaining the
He's
culvert?
gonna look at it to see if it's there. We really don't know if it's there or not. I mean, that was just,
It may not even.
it may not even.
Is it on your property or is it on city property?
No, it's, well, according to the abutter, it's on Williston's property.
Okay.
I think what we might need is something that says that the construction of the facility shall not interfere with the functioning of any existing storm drains on the property, because
Right.
that's the concern, so that they don't put a post in the wrong place or what have
Yeah,
you.
that's
Right.
You're not so concerned with the maintenance of it because it's not really.
One more time, so.
I'm just drafting all these conditions. The construction of the facility shall not interfere with the functioning of any storm drains on the property.
With any storm systems?
Storm, I
storm
don't know, I'm
drains
not
and
up on my
pipes?
technical terms.
Existing storm systems.
Anything
Yeah, existing, that's good.
existing storm drains or culverts,
Okay,
Drains, pipes, or culverts.
yeah.
you got that?
On property, yes.
Your hand cramping yet?
No.
Okay, last item I have on my list was something you mentioned here about stipulation to notify the authorities about leakage from the transformer. Which is say if there were ever some sort of disaster event with the transformer and mineral oil got all over the place, you would notify the authorities. And we were looking for a condition for that, I believe you asked for.
Yeah, I think why not?
Why, yeah.
And that any hazardous materials, including mineral oil, would be properly disposed of.
That's all I had.
There was one more thing that I don't have an issue with, but I just want to state, which was that we've talked about the vegetation, the mowing of the vegetation, and there were some neighbors who commented about their concerns about their view and things like that. So I just want to say, after going to the site visit and having, I observed a couple of things. One is that there really are a lot of invasive species growing in that border. There's bittersweet all over the place. So even if we were to try to require additional plantings of a hedge or something like that to mask the view, I think it would end up getting overrun with those invasive species, and that really the only appropriate way to maintain that buffer strip is probably with mowing.
Clear.
So I just want to say we took a look at that, and I just don't think it's feasible to require additional plantings in the buffer zone. So I would propose we don't write any conditions about that.
No, I agree with you.
Any other issues or conditions? Well, then.
Was there anything else from last time about like the tree removal or anything like that in those dead trees?
The one
and
thing you
things?
also have to do is they're requesting a waiver for setbacks, so you need to have a condition that approves
Approves the waiver.
if you're in approval of it or denies it, but that's that's part of their request, so you need to have something that speaks to that.
Well, I'm the chair, so I don't make the motions this time. I need a volunteer to come up with the motions, and we should probably get the language for that out of the way first so that this is possible. So that would be
So that the
approve the setback.
the request for waiver of setbacks is approved. And I could, even in the condition, when I write it, I could list out exactly what was proposed at each of those boundaries. So the northern boundary, I can't remember, it was like 10 feet, 12 feet, and 21 feet or something like that? Okay.
And you'll
Yeah.
use the specific.
I think so. I think just to be clear that that those are the waivers that they asked for and those are the ones that are being granted.
So that's, I think,
That'll be number 5.
Number
Or
5.
I'll probably put it first because it was part of the application request and it makes sense that that's a priority.
so is there a motion to approve with the stipulations that Jets has, and do you want to read them out? or-
Sure. I have
Oh, I'm sorry,
one more
I didn't see it.
question.
Go ahead.
The CONSCOM requirements, those are in place based on their decision. We don't need to
No,
stipulate.
so what I'll do in the decision is when we, you know how I have the list of findings, and there's one that's specific to Conservation Commission, so I'll just reference the order of conditions and the date it was approved under the Conservation Commission.
I just want
That's
to
how
make
it'll
sure
be
that's
addressed.
accounted for.
It'll be one of the findings.
Okay, thank you.
Who's going to jump in with a motion?
Okay. Think it'd be me.
Everyone's taking a step back.
Were you going to read them?
Oh, you want me to
Well,
read them?
we can
Okay,
make-
sorry.
I can make a motion that we approve with the stipulations of the order of conditions, and then you can read off the conditions, and we can approve it from that.
Okay, so
chat
just to be clear, the order of conditions is Conservation Commission, so this is conditions for special permit.
Right.
Okay, so when the facility is decommissioned, it'll be removed within 2 years. All materials will be properly disposed and recycled as appropriate. There'll be no parking for access. I'll have to wordsmith this a little bit. So no parking for access to site will be on Park Street. Construction of facilities shall not interfere with any existing storm drains, pipes, and culverts on property. Any hazardous materials, including mineral oil, will be properly disposed of. And a request for the waiver of setbacks is approved. And I'll put the specifics in there as well.
I think that fourth one too had a component, if I'm not wrong, that said that not only would they be adequately disposed of, but should an event occur, that they'll notify the authorities.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh, notification of authorities. yeah.
And authorities will be notified?
I'm sure you can claim that.
An emergency?
It's, if you look at the language in the MSDS sheet, section 12, it says, advise authorities if product has entered water courses or
Oh,
sewer
okay.
drains. So you can
Yeah,
just
why
put
don't we
that in
just
there.
use
Okay.
that?
Good. Okay, we have a motion.
Yep.
Is there a second?
Who made the
Second.
motion? Sorry, Chet?
Chet did. And Libby
Second.
seconded. Any discussion at this point? All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? It has passed. I'm gonna go get Jesse. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. I'll
There's-
draft a decision within probably a week, hopefully. And then I'll email you a copy and I'll send you a copy in the mail, and that should hopefully be all you need for your next steps, right?
Maybe I can work with you about drafting a letter.
Sure. That's fine. Yep. Thank you.
Before anybody leaves,
Thank you.
there appears to be a cell phone on the floor back there. Oh, it's yours. Okay.
All right, moving right along. Next up is the special permit for O'Neill Street, Levin Excavating and Construction. Loven, I assume that's you?
Yeah, I'm Dave.
All right, you want to come up and give us an overview of what's going on?
Mark, you want
Or is that you again, Mark?
I'm representing Mr. Logan. Your original agenda had a little break in between times. So
Yeah, no,
I thought
take
that would be
it.
great.
All right.
Fine.
No break.
No break. So, for the record, I'm Mark Reed from Heritage Surveys, representing David Loven, Loven Properties, Inc. Also here tonight is David Boyle, the property owner of this parcel, which is located on the, pretty much the westerly, the easterly side of O'Neill Street. O'Neill Street running in this end of the, or this side of the property, on the west side of the property, Industrial Parkway being here, and Northampton Street being up in here. And the board approved an A&R plan for the Boyles on this back in February, was it, David? Thereabouts. So this application is to construct a new facility for Mr. Loven to move his operation, which is currently located in West Hampton, down to East Hampton here. And I grabbed the wrong, that's the DPW memo. So we have a series of plans that I'd like to run through with you. The parcel currently is a wooded site that contains 5.5 acres of land, being in this configuration. Like the other project that we had, this project went through Conservation Commission approval and has received approval for the, under a notice of intent filing, as well as the stormwater permit application and filing as required by the city. So what we're looking at tonight with this board is for site plan review and use of the property for Mr. Logan. And I believe it, because of the use, it requires a special permit. Right, Jessica?
Yes.
So as I mentioned, the overall site is 5.5 acres, of which only 2.4 acres is going to get developed for Mr. Loven. The rest of the property is wetlands that won't be developed, that are shown on the site plan that's before you and before the project. So the proposal is to construct an 18-foot wide driveway coming off O'Neill Street. That would require, facilitate a wetland crossing, which you mentioned that has been approved by the commission, to enter the site and construct two different buildings. First building would be a 60 by 100 foot building, which would house his office and garage for his equipment. and a secondary building for storage, which is a 40 by 100-foot building to the back, that would store more of the construction-related equipment that Mr. Logan has on the property itself. In order to construct the site itself and meet the standards of the Wetlands Protection Act, we have 2 walls, retaining walls, being constructed on either side of the driveway coming in. We're providing employee and customer parking in this area here, and enough area for churning of or movement of trucks within the site itself, because there'll be bays going in for storage within the 60 by 100-foot office and garage area, and this is more of a cold storage. This won't be heated and also used for storage of the property. The stormwater system for the project has been designed in full compliance with DEP's stormwater management policy, as well as the city's requirements, and again, approved by the commission. There's a series of catch basins with oil water separators being proposed within them that discharge down to what is known as a storm scepter unit, which is further protects against any potential spills of oils or contaminants before entering a stormwater infiltration basin, which is constructed in the rear of the property in itself.
I just want to make sure, where is that? Are you sort of describing it like a moat? Is it all the way around?
So this is the stormwater system. The site itself will be filled so that these lines that you see are actually the site itself is going to come up in grade elevation wise for the project in itself. Once you get in here, this is a large hemlock forest now. This is very large. And this is a large flat area, and in order to construct the building and drainage system, we had to basically take that whole area within this section here and raise the grade up and build the project so that we can get drainage in, proper drainage in, and facilitate the design of the stormwater basin. Before the basin has an emergency overflow and outlet to the old water canal that runs through East Hampton, that runs through the property itself.
How much are you raising the grade?
About 3 feet.
What materials?
So it'll be a gravel. So it'll be a bank run gravel for the base material, and then processed gravel for underneath the pavement for it. So it'll be a combination of gravel, clean material.
Blacktop?
And then blacktop over that. Correct. The third sheet is really a detail of a blow up of the first section of the roadway coming in, or the driveway coming in. We needed this to better clarify the area for the Conservation Commission. In that conservation area, in order to construct this wetland crossing, we have to fill wetlands. So under the Wetlands Protection Act, if you fill wetlands, you have to replicate wetlands. So we have 2 areas of wetland replication, one being here and one being over here, so it meets all the requirements of the Wetlands Protection Act for that in itself. So as you're driving up and down O'Neill Street, the only thing you're gonna see is this driveway coming in. Once you get to about here, you're not gonna see the site itself because it's surrounded with hemlocks. And hemlocks, of course, don't lose their leaves in the wintertime, so you're just gonna have a constant vegetation. Very thick through these wetland areas here. This area in here is all Phragmites that butts the rear of the property that A to Z Storage owns at the intersection of Northampton Street and O'Neill Street, if you're familiar with that, for that area there. When you're looking at the site, there's a grade change where there's a steep embankment coming off of O'Neill Street down into the site itself. So that's why we had to design retaining walls on either side to facilitate fill material to be brought in here to build the roadway itself. And this will all be filled with gravel in accordance with the plans. The fourth sheet is a detail sheet with all the storm scepters, the hooded catch basins and other structures needed, cross sections of the detention basin, the crossings and details, and construction notes for that.
So you're gonna just cut out or take down the hemlocks just for the building area.
Correct.
You're gonna leave the rest surrounding it.
It's all gonna be vegetated, so that we're only clearing 2.3 acres, or rounded up to 2.4 acres.
Right.
A lot of trees.
So what you see is this dashed line
Right.
is the limit of work line in erosion, which comes around here, back out to the roadway, and that represents 2.4 acres of clearing for the project itself. All the vegetation in this surrounding area is going to be maintained.
It's gonna be like that. That's gonna be like hidden around inside.
Yes, it will. Yeah. And you know, for the
out there.
because Mr. Hogan is in the excavating business, he has the ability and the equipment to do the project in itself. So that currently he has a large gravel bank up in West Hampton, so he has the material that he doesn't have to go out and buy and like, you know, a normal developer or person would have to do. So it's, you know, makes it more cost effective for him to do the project.
Do you have a fleet of trucks?
Big bucket of waste.
Yeah, well, three.
Three?
Dump trucks, yeah.
And they'll be located here, obviously, this will be the main headquarters. They'll be
Correct.
coming and going regularly.
Yes. Some weeks we only use one dump truck, maybe a small 6-wheel dump truck, 1-ton dump truck. But it's not, I don't have enough, I have more pieces than I have men. So a lot of the equipment sits a lot of the time too, so it's not too big of an operation.
So who do you expect will actually be working on the site once it's up and running? I know there's office space, and there's also a garage. Do you have people that just come and pick up a truck and then will run out for the day and not be back? Are they making trips back and forth? How does that typically work?
Well, generally speaking, my guys will all meet there in the morning.
Yep.
And then I have like 5 or 6 small service vehicles, and then 1 triaxle dump truck, and 1 tractor, which I haven't bought a dump trailer for yet, but I will. You know, it's not, I'm just bigger than I ever thought I'd get, but I'm certainly not a high volume business. And we go out and do our work on the 2 or 3 jobs we might be working on, and then we come back. Very rarely do we come back in the middle of the day. Once in a while we'll come back for a trailer, but a small trailer behind the pickup. But other than that, once we go, we're gone.
And then what do you have for office staff that's working there or that you anticipate?
Well, right now I have one employee that works about 50% in the office and 50% in the field, and I try to work in the office as little as possible, but I might be in there 10 or 20% of my time. That's pretty much it for office.
So as far as sort of a typical day, maybe you're gonna have maybe 4 or 5 people show up and park their personal vehicles in the lot, and then you'd head out with the trucks, likely for the whole day. Well, would one person half-time be in the office?
Yes.
And then everyone comes back at the end of the day and swaps out their trucks for their personal vehicles.
Sure. Yeah, I might come in and out of the yard once or twice during the middle of the day with my pickup. Once in a while, my partner will pick up and get parked, and I'll drive the dump truck.
Yeah.
Usually I go to the job site 24/7.
What about material deliveries?
Well, there really isn't any room here for stockpiling per se. Not that I wouldn't want to say I never want to be able to dump a load out off, say, of a big truck and put it on some smaller ones, because it's right on blacktop, we can clean it up, but it's not really designed to stockpile materials. once the site's incomplete.
What kind of materials are you talking about?
All the materials that I deal with are inert, sand, stone, washed stone. Sometimes we'll have a piece of concrete or something that will get brought back and put in a pile. In a place that I have now, I wouldn't probably be doing it there because I'm gonna blacktop that. I don't want to hit the blacktop. I want to keep it nice. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. I really don't deal with anything hazardous. You know, I'm not in that business at all. I don't truck hazardous materials.
So you have your office building, and then you have the other building. What's gonna go in that building?
The office was probably gonna be 10 by 10 or 10 by 15. So the office building is only gonna be this small little corner of this, because there'll be bays in here so that he can, in the main building, so he can drive his equipment inside and keep that heated. The intent is that this building, the larger building, would be heated for wintertime use and so forth, and bays so that trucks can park inside of it. And the smaller one is more cold storage, won't be heated for storage of his equipment.
Park an excavator in there for the winter, so there's.
Oh, so the other building is just
Right.
parking your vehicles again?
Right.
Yeah, mainly to get the equipment that's been sitting out year after year all the time.
You're
No
gonna be
place to
parking it.
Sleep inside, yeah.
Do you self-service repair your vehicles?
Sometimes we'll do basic stuff. The bigger stuff I bring to an outsource repair shop. But we do some smaller stuff in there, a little light welding, that kind of thing. But I do not even have one full-time mechanic. We are the maintenance crew. We grease, we'll change oils, but not always. I mean, sometimes we actually do it on the sites because it's easy. They make them so contained so that you don't hardly even get your hands covered with oil anymore, because they have valves that you can open up and spin on filters right here at chest height that you can, it's not like it used to be.
What do you do with the oils once you've changed them?
We put them in containers and I bring them to places that burn waste oil for heat. I have several of my associates have those burners. I don't have one myself, but it's good use of it anyways.
And so just to clarify on the non-heated storage building, that's still gonna be equipment. It's not gonna be storage of materials or, other, like you said, the sort of transfer of one load to another truck or something like that, but it's not gonna turn into a gravel yard or something like that.
No, I don't. We discussed that and we were put the size and it's just not the right property to do that with.
Right.
And
You might have, pipes,
Yeah.
so you would have drainage pipes or fittings or something like that really don't like being outside through the winter months and everything in the storage building.
Yeah.
And keeping those clean so that if he has to use them he doesn't have to
What about building lights?
scrape off the lights or the ice.
I didn't really give that too much thought yet, but I can assure you I'll be checking out other buildings similar to that and talk to several electricians, people that do the lighting plans. I wouldn't want to do anything that's going to be obnoxious thing, but that kind of thing. But it's
Downward wall packs.
Well, yeah, especially where you've
Right.
sort of placed yourself right in the middle of all these wetlands areas. I think it's a good idea to make sure we have minimal lighting while still being safe.
We can do about snow removal.
So we do have areas for snow removal. That was one of our plan. So we have snow removal areas all along this section in here. So the intent would be if during a snow event, it would be pushed to this area. It would stay out or within the work limit lines as approved by the Conservation Commission. So there's a band that's shown on the plan for snow removal right through here. If we have a storm event and there's not enough room, then it would have to be removed from the site, like a lot of people did.
Is there gonna be a permanent delineation that you need to put on the limit of work so that you know that you're not gonna be pushing snow or anything too far into? Is that part of the commission's?
We have a stone filter trench being constructed all the way along this limit of work line.
So there'll be something
So
physical on the
it's
ground
physical
that
on the
you can
ground,
see.
there's a stone trench.
Okay.
So that during the winter, or after the winter, the snow melts, it will infiltrate into the stone trench and clean itself before it goes in here.
But it
And-
also provides a point of reference for
Correct.
employees
And
or
it's there.
whoever to realize that they've gone far enough and
Correct.
they've got to stop.
Correct.
You mentioned a little bit about the sort of waste of the oil, if you're changing your oil, that sort of thing. Small office doesn't seem like it's generating much in the way of waste, but what about any other waste that you might produce on a regular basis or generate through your business?
Oh, you mean oil?
Any kind of waste, whether it's, trash basket or,
Well, right now I have a 3 to 4 yard container at my shop that gets emptied not even once a month.
you expect to continue that?
Yes.
Is there a spot on here for the dumpster or?
It probably would go between the two buildings. We
Okay.
haven't really shown it on the
Yep.
plan itself, but there's room between the two buildings.
Okay.
The office will have a bathroom in it, and the more detailed plan shows that there will be a septic tank here, which will pump up to the street sewer system.
Yep.
And of course, there'll be water servicing it and electricity, underground electricity.
You're a public business. If a customer were to drive up in a car to, procure your services, where would they go? Where would they park?
So there's parking here
Yeah.
for them to park.
And how many spots?
And with employees, we haven't really designated, we have one handicap spot, which is required under the law. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 additional spaces on the site. So that, someone can park in one of those spaces.
And there's a gate noted on the plan, is that
Correct.
just for evening or nighttime or?
For mainly for nighttime use.
Yeah.
Because, we don't want people just driving in there and
Right.
helping themselves.
Basic security.
But during the day, when you guys are all out working, it will still largely be open, you think?
Yes.
Yeah. And how about hours? We talked a little bit about the schedule, but what are your typical sort of hours that there's people that are
My
there?
guys generally come in between 6:30 and 6:45, and we try to be doing business stuff by 7 and getting out of the yard between 7:15, 20 after 7, that kind of thing. And then I really try to get the guys off of work by 4 on the average. Sometimes we'll work till 5, maybe a little later once in a while, but generally speaking, they work on an average of 9 hours a day.
Okay. So, Mark, I assume you've seen the comments from the city engineer?
Yes, yeah, and I did a little memo back to you saying, acknowledging that we received it,
Okay.
and that we will work with the city engineer to comply with his requests. We don't see any issues in any of his comments that he has. We just haven't had a chance to, work out those details. We didn't really want, the only real revision to the plan, and a couple of the comments he had was twofold. One is the sewer, one of the last comments is
Yep.
the sewer detail, he wants to go straight in, so that's just a minor change on the plan.
Yep.
Instead of angling at 45 degrees. On this plan itself, he's talking about there's a guardrail that runs along O'Neill Street.
Yep.
He wants to wrap it into and be connected or near the retaining wall, which we don't have a problem with. We can work with them to make that adjustment. And he's talking about some contours missing in this area here.
Right, with the retaining wall?
And actually, I did a 20 scale blow for this, because it's so many contours and so many lines. I probably would have to do a 10 scale detail, because there's so much information, it just became very busy. So I've got a spot grade in there, and we'll work with him to make sure that the grading is sufficient. And to maintain that, he's recommending a 6-inch berm along O'Neill Street, so
Yep.
that the water within O'Neill Street stays in O'Neill Street and doesn't come into our property, and we definitely would work with him on making those adjustments in the field, so.
Okay, so you're comfortable with all these,
Yeah.
assuming we put in something about,
Yes,
you know, to the
yes.
satisfaction of the city engineer or something about those issues.
Yeah, we have no issues with any of his comments.
I was just thinking, we're talking about somebody from the public driving on. Is that a typical occurrence? I mean, do you have people
Not really, I work primarily from referrals.
Okay.
If you told me, 10 years ago or 12 years ago, I was gonna have 5 or 6 guys working for me, I would say, I don't want, no, 1 or 2 is good for me, you know, but it's just the work keeps coming in, and I just respond to the demand.
But so from a traffic standpoint, like the equivalent of walk-in or drive-in traffic is essentially non-existent for you, and you're
Yeah, right. I was just
planning on
trying to
that.
think of if there was ever 2 customers that ever drove in at the same time in my yard in the last 13 years where I am, and I can't remember it. You know, we've had one swing in and think of something that they wanted me to do when they saw me out in my yard. That was about it.
The nature of his business, where our office is for 3 years, Eats Construction, I have an office next door, and most of the clients, he has to go visit, you know, the price and this and that. When Dietz was next to us, rarely do we see people come looking for him, you know, prospecting for a job or something.
Anybody have any questions or comments? Want to go through the?
I have a question about the Conservation Commission's decisions.
Yes?
I read in the materials we were provided about the environmental monitor to
Yes.
check on the construction. Could you explain what that is and how that person will be selected?
Correct. So that condition is part of most every order of conditions that's issued by the East Hampton Conservation Commission, where a environmental monitor is posed back to the Conservation Commission to do weekly inspections during construction with photos. And I currently am doing a number of them for projects that we've done for or through the Conservation Commission in East Hampton. So that a proposal goes back to the Conservation Commission nominating myself or someone else, David Boyle, as an environmental compliance officer and monitor for. Then the Conservation Commission says yes or no, they like that or don't like that, and then that person goes out on a weekly basis and takes photographs. Jessica gets copies of the reports along in describing what the activity is on the site, along with pictures.
Essentially, that's because we don't have a conservation agent that's able to go out on a daily basis or weekly basis to inspect the construction projects, that the commission requires these weekly reports back to the commission, and if they foresee any issues within those reports, then they'll send somebody out to investigate it. So it's a way for them to keep track of what's happening construction-wise without having a conservation agent in place.
I know there was a problem with some tree removal in a wetland buffer zone recently on another property of yours.
No tree removal.
Or it's, okay, there was something in the paper that I read.
I know.
Okay, I apologize if I'm
No,
misstating the facts. What was the situation there, and why was it not caught by an enforcement officer?
Because we don't have an
Or
enforcement
because
officer.
was there a person assigned to do that job in that instance?
Well, no, that's where our current office is, and that order of conditions is from 2000 or 1998. Our building is 12 years old. My brother just did some mowing in the back that violated the order of conditions. A neighbor called it in. There's many examples in town, without a conservation commission. Once a project is done, it's the honor system.
Mhm.
That's all it is.
This was a completed project that the issue was not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Additionally, for this project, though, just regarding the Conservation Commission, when I went through that process, they, the East Hampton Conservation Commission, subjected this to peer review, so an outside consultant had to look at this as well. And actually, the buildings were downsized based upon a consultant that wasn't hired by Dave to review all this.
in addition to just the monitoring of the construction activity, the two wetland replication areas will have a soil scientist monitoring those areas. Could be the same person, could be a different person, depending on the situation that comes up. Charles Douchy, who is a well-respected wetlands consultant and that we've worked with for many, many years, did the wetlands delineation on the project. He is pretty much semi-retiring type person, but he still does work. So whether he would do the monitoring to make sure that the plant species that are within the two replication areas survive and meet the requirements under the Act, Wetlands Protection Act.
And just for the board's information, any permit that has an order of conditions, a required step is to file a certificate of completion at the end of that project. And I think under the Wetlands Act, correct me if I'm wrong, that they can't even file for that certificate for 2 years until the wetlands become established, I think.
Correct.
So, so the commission still has 2 years of jurisdiction on this project.
And most likely will continue that jurisdiction beyond that to make sure that, it stays.
Okay. Yeah, I'm asking these questions because it seems to me that the biggest notable thing about this project is that it's a pretty substantial change to the topography.
Yep.
There are pretty large wetlands around the property. I went by there today and it's a very steep slope. So, and that's a lot of paved surface and new building.
Right.
So I, some questions about the appropriateness of the site for this use, but for that reason. But
Mark, what is the actual square footage of the pavement again? I think is that like half an acre maybe?
Yeah, approximately the pavement itself, mainly this area right in here, is about half to 3/4 of an acre. The 2.3 acre number is, the entire circumference, which includes all the stormwater system, the grading, the snow storage area, this grading up in here to facilitate the whole thing. But this pavement width is 100 feet in width, and it is just over 100 feet in length.
Yeah.
30 scale, would have to be 30 scale. I don't have a 30 scale. All right, we'll do
I need
That's fine. So it's about 125 to 30 feet this way. So it's 100, just over 12,000 square feet of blacktop right in this area here. And then, the driveway going up. So.
Anybody else have any other questions? Anybody from the public have any comments or questions?
I don't see any here.
All right, should we go through these special permit criteria just to make sure we're hitting on all of them?
Go for it.
First one is conformance with provisions of the ordinances of the city of East Hampton, general laws of Massachusetts, and applicable rules and regulations of state and federal agencies. It seems like we've got that here, especially with the oversight of the Conservation Commission. Unless anybody has any concerns. Protection of city amenities and abutting properties through minimizing of any detrimental or offensive uses or destruction of unique or important natural, scenic, or historic features on the site. It seems like it's pretty minimal on city amenities and the natural and scenic stuff. I think they're trying to minimize the tree work to the extent you can once it's in there. Minimization of traffic and safety impacts. Sounds like it's pretty minimal traffic-wise. Adequacy of the methods of disposal of sewage and refuse, and drainage of surface and subsurface water. Sounds like the sewage and refuse is minimal, and there's a stormwater plan that's been approved by the Conservation Commission, right?
Correct.
For the stormwater and drainage. Adequate means of protecting wetlands, watersheds, aquifers, and well areas. Obviously, that's gonna be one of the biggest hurdles here with the Conservation Commission and all the wetland stuff, but I think there appears to be oversight on that issue. Mitigation of adverse impacts on the city's resources, including the city's water supply and distribution systems, sewage collection and treatment systems, fire protection, and streets. Again, it seems, you have a question there, Libby?
So we just had the stuff from the city engineer about the guardrail.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we should
Yeah.
probably make all of those a condition.
Yes.
Right.
Would be my guess.
City engineers?
Right.
Yeah.
You want to, wait a minute. Wait. So all, 1, 2, 3, 4, all 5 of these, you want to make actual, you want to translate these into conditions? Or do you want
Well,
to just reference the
I
city
think we
engineer's
should reference the
letter?
city engineer's memo and give the discretion to the city engineer. It sounds like they may have some details to work out, and I don't know how best to word that in our decision, Jess, but I would say if they're obligated to address the concerns raised in the memo, August 12th, action of the city engineer.
Applicant will address concerns identified by city engineer in memo dated
August 29th.
August 29th, 2016.
Yeah, to the satisfaction of the city engineer. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
City engineer. Okay.
Moving along, provisions of off-street loading and unloading of vehicles, incidental to the normal operation of parking, lighting, internal traffic control. It sounds like the traffic and parking is an issue. We did mention in passing the lighting. I think it's
The lighting
I think it's
and-
important to make I think we should make it a condition that, Jessica, I don't know what the language is for the sort of
Lighten will meet,
downward directed, environmental friendly,
you
dark
could,
skies.
you could
whatever that
reference the
stuff
dark
is.
sky standards.
Yeah.
That's sort of the easiest document to direct to.
Okay. I mean, does
So-
that make sense to everyone? I think that when you're
Yeah.
putting something like this in the middle of the wetlands, that's the easiest.
Is it
We
clear
should
to
say-
you what we're talking about with the lighting?
Well, it sounds to me, just using my common sense, you just don't, maybe a motion light is, that comes on and off would be fine, but any lights that are left on for security purposes, like through the night, they just need to be downward so that they're not glaring in any
Yeah, I would
direction.
say, I mean, I don't know what the specifics of like the dark sky standard are, but I think generally it's sort of, they're directed into the property and not out, they're directed
Right.
downward instead of up, and
Yeah. Right.
just kind of minimizing the impact of the light, while also realizing that there's security issues and safety issues that you gotta be worried about too.
Right.
How
I
about,
mean, if you were to put 2 or 3 wall packs, wall-mounted lights that have the equipment to do down lighting on the building, that's gonna light up this entire area and for security, and if they wanted to put one more for motion,
Right.
you know, behind the building or something.
Right.
Right, I mean, if somebody's
See
leaving
something.
at 6 PM in the middle of December, I don't want them stumbling through the dark, right? But,
Yep.
so just so we don't have to get specific, I'm still just gonna reference the dark sky standards, just
Right.
with an understanding of what that is, and say lighting will meet dark sky standards to minimize lighting on adjacent properties into the wetlands.
Right.
sounds good.
Okay.
Applicant's effort to integrate the development into the existing landscape through design features such as vegetative buffers and retention of open space or agricultural land. Again, I think it sounds like they're retaining as much of the trees as they can, and the Conservation Commission is sort of addressing the wetland side. Do
Right.
we need any other concerns on that issue?
No.
Consistency of the development with respect to setback area, placement of parking, architectural style, and landscaping. I don't think has any issues. Adequacy of measures to prevent pollution of surface or groundwater, to minimize erosion and sedimentation, and to minimize changes in groundwater levels, increased runoff, and potential for flooding. I think there's a stormwater plan in place, and some of the city engineer's issues with the berm, I think address a lot of that. Does anybody else have any other concerns or issues with that?
No. I
Talked
don't
about the
think so.
snow removal too.
The snow removal, right. And adequacy of methods to ensure that the use will not constitute a nuisance by reason of unacceptable level of air or water pollution, excessive noise, or visually flagrant structures and accessories. It sounds like the hours are pretty reasonable. There's not a lot of traffic with heavy machinery during the
Right.
day. They're pretty much off-site. That doesn't seem like. we need-
Noise doesn't,
What's that?
you didn't talk about noise, and it's just referenced in here, so I'm just,
Okay.
seems
well,
fine, but.
Right, because it's not, I mean, that was sort of what I was getting at, is sort of hours of operation, and the fact that they're not kind of making multiple runs back and forth with that kind of,
And it's an industrial area.
it's an industrial zone, right? Despite the beautiful wetlands we have there.
Hmm.
All right, does anybody else have any other comments or questions?
I motion.
So there's just two conditions, just to be clear, right?
City engineer's memo and the lighting?
Yep,
I think so.
okay.
A motion to approve the special permit for an O'Neill Street Loven excavation and construction, given the two stipulations. Conditions.
Can I get a second?
I'll second this.
Yeah, to the third.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right,
All right,
thank you.
thank you very much.
Good luck, gentlemen.
Go.
Draft a decision soon.
Tidy this up.
All right. Couple administrative items, planning board application forms.
Yeah, so I,
That's an exciting read.
woohoo! I have hard copies here if anybody feels like they want them.
I'll take.
Okay, here, pass this down. There's site plan and special permit in there. So this is long overdue. This was like on my list of things to do when I first started, and it's been almost 5 years, so here we are. It'll be 5 years in March. So this is to try to provide some more information to the applicants themselves. I think most people who file for special permits know the drill, but I think it's good to sort of have that listed out on what the process is and to give them more information about timelines. And so that's really the big addition to it. Also requiring some digital submissions. With site plan approval, typically it's just, like 2 pages and I can scan it, but with some of these bigger documents, I really want to, we're starting to migrate to an online permitting system. So Dynamic Energy, I think, was the first application that we had that I put into the permitting system. So I'm still trying to deal with some of the bugs in that system, but in order for department review to be able to upload those documents without me having to scan them. And again, when I have conversations with applicants, I tell them I want a digital copy, but this makes it more official. It's not just me saying I want a digital copy.
It was nice to have the files like that, by the way. Thank
I
you.
liked the Dropbox.
Did you like the Dropbox?
It
Did
worked
that
well
work?
for me.
That was good.
Was it good for you guys down there, or was it too complicated?
Too complicated.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Why would it be complicated?
I don't know. There was just a ton of files, and I'm trying to, and I think what my thought is for that, just to digress for a second, is that when the decisions are filed, I'll put them in there, and it'll just be like an online record-keeping system for you, so that if you want to go back and look at an old decision for a past application and just see how you've dealt with a certain situation or a certain condition, you'll continue to have access to that, and it just doesn't clog your email
So
system.
you're going to be able to keep that up there like a library,
Yes.
at least for now?
That's my
yeah.
plan.
Run out of space.
Nice.
That's my plan.
And you'll just let us know when stuff has been added to it.
Yep, and I'll
via
just
email.
shoot you an email and say, the decisions now for whatever have been filed. And it's important for you to look at those decisions. Sorry, we're going off on a little tangent,
Yep.
but I send them to Jesse. Jesse looks at them. He gives me the authorization to sign. I sign on his behalf. I file it at the city clerk. However, if there's anything in there that is incorrect in terms of findings that you believe the board found, I try to keep really good notes, but if there's an error, the board has the ability to amend the decision as long as it's not triggering a new condition or, so if there's an error in there administratively, you have the ability to fix that at an upcoming meeting. And so that's why it's important for me to review it, and just for me to remember to send it to everybody, that just because Jesse signs off on it doesn't mean that sort of your job is done.
It's law.
It also helps when you come to these hearings, the more of those decisions you see, the more sort of you're thinking about the things you have to sign off on at the end, so
Right.
it can sort of help you frame hearings.
Right.
Helped you.
So that's my plan anyways, to create that Dropbox as an online library for you all, so that you all could, and I'm not gonna put everything in there, but just the stuff that's relevant to you.
Excellent.
Very good.
All right, Barnes Aquifer? Or are you not done with the last one?
So are you good with those forms?
They look
Okay.
good to me.
The only thing that I would note to you is that, and I'm still waiting for a hard copy of the final report, but we did have that industrial zoning review, and one of the things that came up was that our fees are so low in comparison to our neighbors. And so I just kept the $100 in there for now, but for upcoming discussion, I think we need to think about how we change our fee structure.
Did we determine if that's us or city council who sets that?
I think we would have to propose it. I
We
have to check
propose
with
it
them.
to
I think
them.
I have to check with the mayor exactly
Okay.
what the process is. but
They're involved at least, it's
they're
not us
involved, and
unilaterally.
really it's supposed to compensate for my time in doing it, and so, you know, at least probably $200 would be a minimum in terms of the
I would
time
say
that it
that,
takes for me
doubling
to process the application, to send it to all the departments, to put all the information together, to continually be in communication with the applicant. It takes several hours of time. So anyway, so we can discuss about that later. But in the meantime, I'll just make those official then.
Is there anything else significant that was changed?
I added that authorization to represent form, that's
good.
new.
Uh-huh.
In case an applicant can't attend a meeting and they wanna authorize their,
That's on the application already, isn't it? But it's like buried on the piece of paper.
there's a, no, I don't know, I think we asked for a letter maybe.
Oh,
I
you
didn't-
know, I'm thinking of is if you're the owner, you
If
have
you're
to
the
sign
owner,
if
you
you're
sign
not.
off.
Yeah, that's
But
what it
there's
is.
no authorization to represent,
Yeah.
so that's that.
All right.
Okay.
And then Baypack, I had been, because we were communicating about this project, Patty had asked about planning board representation. I know, Chet, you've recently moved and you've had some health issues, and so your attendance hadn't been that high, and so she was wondering if Chet wanted to continue. She said that she had tried to contact you and she hadn't heard back, or if there was somebody else from the
No, I
planning board.
wrote her back.
Okay.
And I was at the meeting today
Today,
and I
correct.
told them that I
Excellent.
had no problem going to them. It was just, I had a bad month and a half.
So,
It
okay,
happens.
so you'll continue to represent. Okay.
Great.
Yeah, I was in touch with her at least every other week.
Oh, okay.
Because she would write me how I was doing.
Okay.
Well, if you lose interest or time, let people know. I'm sure there's other people that
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they're
dying for a midweek, midday meeting.
dying for another board to be on.
Can I make a quick request for an administrative item on a future agenda?
Sure.
Whenever there's time for it, like
Yeah.
don't, no rush. But I'd love to have a talk about site visits and how those work into our process, and maybe how we can make it more expedient for the applicant to do the site visit without having to have additional meetings.
So the Conservation Commission, if the applicant requests it, they will often do a site visit prior to the public hearing being opened up, so they've already got that information in hand.
Yeah.
And that would be the most expedited way to be able to address it and still hear information. I mean, these guys reached out to me and said, does the board want a site visit? And they were asking me Thursday before a long weekend, so, that's hard to schedule, not knowing people's schedules, so.
Part of the problem too is like, a lot of times it's easy to go and sort of give an unofficial site visit, right? It's either public property or it's viewable from public property, but a lot of times it's not. And
Right.
so you can't really just have it be on the members that, sort of what you'll do is your due diligence before you go is swing
Right.
by and check it out, because you can't
Right.
always do that.
trespass on
And,
Right.
and the one we had with the solar facility was great because they were all there, they
Right.
could answer questions, I learned a ton. And, I just think if we could do that as a matter of course, especially with maybe new construction or something like that, so that we sort of know when they are typically scheduled for and can do it before we open the public hearing. I think it would save everyone a lot of time.
So Conservation Commission, they have a standard site visit time where they typically do it Saturday mornings at 8:00 in the morning, and that's sort of their standard time. So, you'll have to figure that out. And what I can
It's certainly
potentially,
worth discussing, because the other thing is it's not like we all have to go, and so then
Yeah.
I think we have varying degrees of familiarity with stuff in East Hampton, so I think some of the stuff, I have no idea what it is until I go and look at it, and somebody else may have camped there as a kid, like, I don't know,
Right.
so.
so what I can do moving forward potentially is when applicants come to me and they're about to file an application, or I'm aware they're filing the application, I can ask them, do you think it would be beneficial for the board to have a site visit, and would you like to try to schedule that prior to the public hearing being opened? And I can just work with them to pick a date and just notify you, and then who shows up can show up, kind of thing. I mean, if that works for now, or,
I think that's a good idea.
Let's try it and see
Okay.
how it goes.
okay.
I mean, I think it'll depend on the project, but I think it's a good idea.
I mean, typically, a lot of the stuff that we see are just
Right, we're not gonna
downtown
go look at
stuff.
Milltown Deli's
You're
site.
not gonna go
'cause
look at
it's not-
Milltown Deli, but, but for new construction projects, I think it makes sense,
Yeah.
especially with, some of these
Yeah,
higher impact ones.
Yeah,
yeah,
all right,
thanks.
can I get a motion to adjourn?
You got it. I make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. All right.